The crystal glass shimmered under the chandelier. Emily's smile didn't reach her eyes. She leaned over, adjusted her clutch, and slipped something into my champagne. I stood still behind the restroom door just a second too early to re-enter, just in time to see it. My pulse pounded. She twirled the glass gently, the tablet already dissolving. Then she turned to face the crowd again, our family, friends, her husband. She didn't see me watching. It wasn't rage, it wasn't even shock. It was a strange calm that settled over me, cold and quiet. I stepped forward, smile tight, heels silent. She looked at me, handed me the glass. "To sisters," she said. I took the glass, held her gaze, and in one clean motion swapped it with the one she'd poured for Mark. He walked up just as I finished. "I'll drink to that," he said softly, lifting it to his lips. I nodded. Cheers. 12 minutes later, the ballroom spiraled into chaos. Mark collapsed into the gift table, knocking over a vase. Guests screamed. Emily rushed to his side, eyes wide, voice shrill, too shrill. I didn't move. My hands were steady. I just watched her. That look on her face, panic, not grief. Fear of exposure, not worry for him. And that's when I knew. It was never about me being paranoid. It was always about her being careful, until tonight. I walked outside as the ambulance lights flashed red over the marble pillars. The night air in Seattle smelled of rain and guilt. I finally exhaled. She tried to humiliate me. She wanted to drug me again, because one time in college she got away with it. Back then nobody believed me. Back then I passed out in a dorm hallway while she flirted with my boyfriend. Back then Mom said I must have been drinking too much. Back then Emily said I was dramatic. But not tonight. Tonight I held the power. And the silence was beautiful. Would you have done the same? Or would you have walked away? Again. Where are you listening from? Have you ever been betrayed by someone who shared your childhood? Subscribe for more true stories about justice, closure, and quiet. Empowerment on EN Reddit story. People say sibling rivalry fades with age. But I've learned something else. Sometimes it grows quieter, sharper. It just learns how to wear pearls. Emily and I weren't enemies. Not out loud. We were raised to be polite. To pose for holiday photos. To call each other sis in birthday cards. But underneath the smiles were decades of tiny cuts. We grew up in a modest home in Tacoma. Shared a bedroom with pink curtains and uneven floorboards. She got the bed by the window. I got the side facing the closet. Emily was 3 years older. 3 years louder. 3 years shinier in every way that counted. She got the lead role in the school play. I handed out flyers in the hallway. She went to prom with Michael Thomas. I cried in the laundry room when he stopped texting. 6 months later, she posted a photo with him at a concert, her hair curled, his arm tight around her waist. Mom said, "It's not her fault, boys like her more." Dad said nothing. He just offered me ice cream and turned up the volume on the television. But that's not what hurt the most. What stung deeper was how Emily always made me feel like the jealous one. Like I was too sensitive, too dramatic. Too much. Every time I tried to call her out, she'd laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. You're always so serious. You know I love you, right?" And somehow I'd end up apologizing. Even in adulthood, the dynamic never shifted. Emily stayed in Seattle. Married Mark. Became a high school English teacher. Posted curated photos of bookshelves and flower bouquets. People loved her. Even when they didn't know her. I moved to Portland at 35. Started a small marketing consultancy. Built something slow and steady without shortcuts. I didn't post much. Didn't chase applause. We kept in touch barely. Birthdays, holidays, the occasional Sunday text. I kept it surface level. She always dipped just deep enough to remind me she was still the older sister. But last month her anniversary invitation came in a gold-trimmed envelope. I stood over my sink with the card in hand, water dripping from the dishes, my fingers damp. Mom called an hour later. "You'll come, right?" she asked, her tone already expecting a yes. It's a big night for her. I stared at the dishes. then at my empty calendar. Then said, "Sure." The Bellevue Hotel glowed like a wedding cake. All white marble and golden chandeliers. Inside the ballroom smelled faintly of rosewater and lemon tarts. I wore a navy sheath dress, simple, clean, forgettable. I didn't want to compete. I just wanted to get through it. Emily floated across the room like a seasoned hostess. Her hair curled just enough, her smile calibrated for each guest. She spotted me near the entrance and swept in for a hug. "Laura," she said, dragging the name like honey, "you look rested." Rested. That word landed with the weight of a slap in silk gloves. I returned the hug. Light. Controlled. You too. Mark trailed behind her, buttoning his jacket. He looked like someone who'd practiced smiling in the mirror. Tired around the eyes, tight in the jaw. We shook hands. "Glad you made it," he said. "I wouldn't miss it," I lied. Emily's hand rested on his chest. Possessive, almost performative. Then she leaned in toward me. "There's champagne by the window. Grab a glass before the toasts." I walked away before she could say more. Her perfume clung to my throat. Something floral with a sharp, bitter base. I found a quiet corner near the drink table. Poured myself something bubbly. Took a sip. Breathed. The room was full, guests chatting, waiters gliding through. But I felt alone. Not in the sad way. In the detached, floating above your body kind of way. Like I was watching a play I'd once auditioned for but never got the part. Mark passed by again. His tie was slightly off-center. Without thinking, I reached out and adjusted it. He blinked. "Oh, thanks." Emily appeared seconds later. Saw my hand still midair. Her smile twitched. "I already fixed that," she said. Her voice low even. She placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. "I guess it didn't stay." I stepped back. Felt the temperature shift. Mark looked away. I downed the rest of my drink and excused myself. In the restroom mirror, I reapplied lip gloss. Checked my mascara. Checked my heart. It was beating fast, but not out of fear. There was something off tonight. Something under her polish, her curated affection. I'd spent years ignoring it. Telling myself she didn't mean to cut so deep. But I wasn't a teenager anymore. And this time I was watching closely. The restroom lights were warm but sharp. They revealed everything, pores, doubts, and truths I hadn't admitted out loud. I washed my hands slowly. Watched the water circle the drain. Then I heard it, her voice. "Emily." Soft. Laced with amusement. "She won't even notice. It's just a little help." I froze. The wall separating the women's lounge from the hallway was thin. I tilted my head, careful. Her laugh came next, tight and familiar. I stepped out quietly just in time to see her near the drink table. Her hand hovered above a glass. Mine. She looked around, dropped something in, a pill. It melted fast. And she smiled. That slow, secretive smile I hadn't seen in years. It hit me harder than anything else. She was enjoying it. She was still that girl. Still, the sister who once unplugged my laptop during my senior essay. Still the one who flirted with my college boyfriend and said, "I didn't know you were serious." I stepped forward silently. My heels barely made a sound on the carpet. She didn't see me, didn't flinch. I reached the table, picked up her untouched glass instead. Switched it with mine. The pill was now in Mark's glass. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel wicked. I just felt done. Emily turned toward me with a practiced grin. "There you are. I was wondering if you got lost." She handed me the drink. She thought I hadn't seen her poison. "To sisters," she said. I clinked glasses with her, but didn't drink. Mark appeared seconds later. He looked at us both, tired, outnumbered, then reached for the glass, his glass now. Lifted it. Sipped. "Cheers," he murmured. 12 minutes later, he collapsed. But this chapter isn't about Mark. It's about me. It's about how I spent a lifetime doubting my instincts. How every time Emily twisted reality, I let her. How I questioned my own sanity because she handed me pretty words instead of truth. This time I saw clearly. And I acted. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I needed to break the loop. Because I couldn't carry one more apology that wasn't mine to give. As the room spiraled into panic voices rising, glasses shattering, I stood still. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't the one unraveling. The hospital room smelled like bleach and lemon polish. Bright, too bright. Mark lay on the bed, an IV in his arm, a monitor beeping steadily behind him. Emily stood by the window, arms crossed, pacing slowly. She'd changed into flats. Her lipstick was gone, but the mask still on. I sat quietly near the door. Nobody had asked me to stay. Nobody had asked me to leave. So I didn't. The doctor said it was a mild sedative. Non-lethal. Someone had slipped it into his drink. No one dared say who. But I watched Emily's eyes when he said it. They didn't widen in surprise, they narrowed. She probably didn't mean it, Mom had whispered on the phone later that night. She's under stress. Anniversary planning can be a lot. That sentence haunted me. Not because it was wrong, but because it was familiar. Emily could get away with anything as long as she looked tired enough. Distracted enough, fragile enough. I remembered breaking a plate when I was 12. She said it was me. Mom believed her. I cried. She watched. No remorse. Just curiosity, like a scientist observing a rat in a maze. In that hospital room, I realized nothing had changed. Mark stirred, his eyes fluttered. Emily rushed over, her voice soft. Mark, baby. You okay? He blinked slowly, looked past her, then saw me. His gaze steadied. Not on her. On me. You switched them, he said, not a question. A fact. Whispered. Emily froze. Switched what? He swallowed hard. You saved me. I didn't answer. I didn't nod. But the silence said enough. Emily stepped back, color draining from her face. You must be confused, honey. You fainted, that's all. But Mark's eyes didn't leave mine. And suddenly I saw it, years of silences brushed off Mark's subtle corrections. He had lived inside the same maze. He just hadn't found the way out. Not yet. I stood, smoothed my skirt. Call me if you need anything, I said softly. Then I walked out, past nurses and machines and walls painted in false calm. The night air outside hit like a slap. Cold, real. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood on the sidewalk, wondering how long it would take before someone else finally believed me without needing proof. Because for the first time in my life, someone had. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I found myself parked outside a diner on 45th, the kind with flickering neon signs and tired waitresses who didn't ask questions. I ordered black coffee. No cream, no sugar. Just heat and bitterness. It fit the moment. My phone buzzed. Emily. 7 missed calls. 2 texts, please don't overreact. You misunderstood everything. I stared at the screen. The same screen I once dropped at age 17, sobbing because Michael dumped me via text right after Emily told him I'd cheated. I hadn't. But she said she'd heard something. Years of lies dressed in concern. A pattern she never broke. Only refined. I didn't reply. I didn't owe her that. Across the diner, a mother was feeding a toddler slices of apple. She laughed when he made a mess. Soft, patient. Something tightened in my chest. That could have been us if I'd ever let myself believe in peace. If I hadn't spent so many years bracing for sabotage disguised as sisterhood. By the time I drove back to my apartment, it was almost 3 a.m. The city felt hollow. Like everyone had gone to sleep. Except the parts of me I wished would. I walked in, dropped my shoes by the door, and sat on the kitchen floor. Tile cold against my spine. That's when I opened the group chat. It was still named Bennett Sisters, even though only Emily and I ever posted. Mostly Emily. Photos of brunch. Memes about the joys of aging. Links to yoga classes I never clicked. 3 weeks earlier, she'd sent me a video of her anniversary dress fitting. I hadn't replied. Tonight I typed, "Do you want to tell me what was in the pill?" then deleted it. Instead, I left the chat. Not out of drama, but because silence is a language too. And it was the only one she never learned to read. I turned off my phone, lit a lavender candle. The scent reminded me of her perfume, but softer, less weaponized. Then I sat at the kitchen table sipping lukewarm coffee from the diner. The question circled my mind like a moth in a glass jar. What else had she done that no one ever saw? The next morning, my mother called. Her voice carried that tone, tight, sugary, laced with guilt she wanted to hand off. "I heard you left the hospital early," she said. I stayed silent. She continued. "Emily said Mark is resting. Nothing serious." I pressed the phone to my ear harder, like pressure could translate emotion. "Mom, do you know what she did?" A pause. Too long. "Then she's always been high-strung, Laura. You know that." It was probably just nerves. There it was again, the rewiring of reality. The gentle sanding down of a crisis into something digestible. Mark could have been seriously hurt. He wasn't. She snapped back, too fast, too defensive. Then softer. "She loves you, you know. She just shows it differently." I bit down on the inside of my cheek, hard. Because I knew what she really meant. That I was the difficult one. The one who always made things worse by speaking up. When the call ended, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea gone cold. A drizzle fell across the Portland skyline. The kind that made everything gray, everything quiet. My inbox chimed. An email. Subject: "I'm sorry." From Emily Bennett. I opened it. A single line. I didn't know it would go that far. No explanation, no confession. Just a hint, enough to say oops, not enough to admit I meant to. It wasn't an apology. It was damage control. That afternoon I texted Mark. "Me. You okay?" Mark physically, yes. Mark emotionally. "I don't know." Mark, "You saved me." You know that, right? I didn't reply right away. But my hands trembled, something between rage and relief. "Me, you don't owe me anything. But if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." He responded with a single word: "Thank you." That night I made dinner for one. Seared salmon. Spinach with garlic. A glass of water with lemon. I sat at the table watching the steam rise, and I thought about how quiet the betrayal was. Not dramatic. Not screaming. Just a tiny pill dropped into a glass. 1 second. One gesture. One sister. And still no one in my family had called to ask if I was okay. No one had asked if I felt safe. No one had said, "We believe you," except Mark. And that was enough. For now. But I couldn't help wondering. If I hadn't seen her that night, how far would she have gone? I didn't plan to see her again so soon. But 4 days later, she showed up at my door. No call, no warning. Just 3 knocks, calm, rehearsed, like she expected to be welcomed in. I stood behind the peephole for a long moment. Then opened it. Emily stood there in a beige coat and glossy boots. Hair curled. Lipstick pale. A bakery bag in hand like a peace offering. "I brought those lemon scones you used to like," she said. That line. That used to. Like we were 2 girls still playing house, not 2 women standing at the edge of something sharp. I didn't move. "I don't want them." She blinked, then smiled. That slow, layered smile she always used when she wanted something. "Can we just talk?" I stepped aside, let her in. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see if she'd lie to my face. She set the bag on the counter, took off her coat, looked around like she owned the place. "This is cute. Very Portland." I stayed standing, arms crossed. "Why did you do it?" She paused, blinked again. Like she hadn't expected me to go straight for it. She sat on my couch. Exhaled deeply. "I was trying to soften you up. Just something mild. You'd laugh about it later. Like a prank." I almost laughed then. But it wouldn't have sounded right. It would have shattered. "A prank," I repeated. "You call drugging me a prank?" She looked up sharply. "I didn't drug you, Laura. I just wanted to loosen you up. You've been so stiff. I didn't recognize her. Or maybe I did, and that's what scared me more. You were going to humiliate me in front of 70 people. Again, her eyes darted. Not denial, not guilt, just calculation. How far could she push before I walked? I've always felt like you looked down on me, she said finally. You're so perfect. Your little business. Your independence. Your quiet judgment. There it was. The motive dressed up in wounded pride. A mirror turned backward. All the things I'd never flaunted turned into weapons in her mind. I don't judge you, I said quietly. I just stopped apologizing for existing. Emily's eyes watered. But the tears didn't fall. She folded her hands tightly in her lap. You always had a way of making me feel invisible, Laura. I shook my head. No, Em. You just hated not being the only one people saw. Silence. Tight. Unbreathable. She stood wiped under her eyes with 2 fingers and walked toward the door. Before she opened it, she said, without turning, I didn't mean to hurt him. But she did. And deep down she knew it. After she left, I sat on the couch for hours. Her perfume still clung to the throw pillow, sweet, citrusy, nauseating. I should have thrown it out. But instead, I kept inhaling. Let it haunt the silence. Her words circled in my head. I didn't mean to hurt him. You always had a way of making me feel invisible. They weren't apologies. They were confessions of envy wrapped in ribbons. Later that evening, I pulled out an old storage box from my closet. Inside, photo albums, notebooks, birthday cards I never threw away. And one envelope. The one that held the internship offer I never got to use. I'd forgotten it still existed. New York. A summer program in marketing for recent grads. I'd been 23, eager, terrified, and proud. It was my shot, and then a week before the flight, I got a call from the coordinator. They had concerns. Apparently, I had emailed unprofessionally a long ranting message full of typos and personal insults. Only I hadn't. Emily had borrowed my laptop that same week. Said hers was acting up, smiled sweetly. Handed it back clean. I never proved anything. And I stayed in Tacoma that summer watching her post photos from some poetry seminar she got into last minute. At the time, I told myself it was coincidence. Just bad luck. But sitting there now, the weight of it all settled into my bones. She hadn't just sabotaged that night with Mark, she'd been chipping at me for years. Quietly. Effortlessly. With a smile that never meant safety. I called Ellen, my old boss, now friend. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, stranger. I didn't waste time. Can you remind me, did you write my recommendation for that NY program? A pause. Of course I did. I sent it directly to the admissions email you gave me. Did they ever contact you? Never. Why? My throat tightened. No reason. Just something I'm trying to piece together. We talked 10 more minutes. Mostly about her garden. She always knew how to shift the weight of a conversation without making you feel dismissed. By the time I hung up, I felt steady. Not better, just anchored. I opened my laptop, typed how to request archived emails from over 10 years ago. It was a long shot, but I needed to see it. To confirm what I already knew. She'd stolen more than just peace. She'd stolen chances. And the people who enabled her, my parents' old friends, even past partners, they'd all mistaken charm for goodness. Volume for truth. I wasn't making that mistake anymore. 2 days later, Mark called. Not texted. Not emailed. He called. His voice was low, careful. Can we meet? I said yes. We chose neutral ground, an old greenhouse cafe just outside the city. Bright, quiet. No shadows to hide in. He arrived before me. Hair damp, eyes tired like he hadn't been sleeping much. He stood when I approached. Pulled out the chair, gentle the way I remembered. Thanks for coming, he said. I nodded. I figured you had something to say. We ordered tea. Neither of us touched it. I've been thinking, he started, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. About things I ignored. About how many times I made excuses for her. I didn't interrupt, didn't rescue. I let the silence press in. It made space for truth. He looked at me finally, and his voice cracked. I think she's been doing this to me for years. Little things. Making me question what I said, where I went, even how I felt. Gaslighting. Emotional erosion. The kind that doesn't leave bruises but builds a cage. He paused. I found something last night. A bottle in her makeup drawer. Same pills the doctor mentioned. I didn't flinch. I didn't have to. What are you going to do? I asked. He let out a breath. I don't know. I'm still untangling what's real. But I wanted to thank you. No one's ever protected me from her before. Those words did something to me. Opened something. He wasn't just a husband, he was another survivor. Of the same storm I'd weathered for decades. Before we left, he reached into his jacket and handed me something. A folded piece of paper. A letter, something I wrote, in case I forget how I got here. I took it. Didn't read it right away. Some truths need quiet, and I was still learning how to hold silence without letting it swallow me. When we stood, he didn't hug me. He just said, I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. But I did say now you do. That night, I reread her email. That one line. I didn't know it would go that far. And all I could think was, she didn't care how far it went as long as she stayed ahead. I looked out my window. Streetlights glowing. Quiet rain again. This time I wasn't thinking about what she took. I was thinking about what I was finally ready to take back. The worst part wasn't the pill. Or the party. Or even Emily's smile afterward. It was the silence. The kind that follows you into bed at night. That lingers in your coffee the next morning. That settles in your chest heavy and cold like damp wool you can't take off. After Mark's call, I waited. Not for him, he'd said enough. I waited for my parents. For my mother's voice. For my father's awkward attempt at comfort. For someone to say, we believe you, Laura. But the phone stayed silent. No missed calls. No text. No, are you okay, just absence. I stared at the lavender candle on my table, still half burned from the night Mark collapsed. Its flame danced gently as if mocking me. Once that scent had made me feel calm. Now it made me feel alone. I finally texted Mom. My thumbs trembled more than I expected. I need to talk about what happened with Emily. Her reply came 6 hours later. Laura, please don't make this bigger than it is. She's fragile right now. Fragile. The same word they'd always used. Emily's protective cloak. Delicate. Sensitive. Misunderstood. I was the intense one. The one who held onto things too long. The one who didn't know how to forgive. But I remembered. I remembered the college professor. The internship. The boyfriend who disappeared. All the tiny slashes hidden beneath birthday cakes and photo frames. And now nearly poisoning someone at her own anniversary party. Still, I was told to stay quiet. That night I called Kelsey. She lived in Bend now. We hadn't talked in months. She picked up groggy. Laura, wow, hey. Is everything okay? I told her. Not everything, but enough. The party, the drink. The hospital. She went quiet. Then said, she's always had it out for you, huh? I didn't answer right away, because hearing someone else say it felt dangerous. Like opening a door you'd kept shut for too long. I thought I was the problem, I whispered. She paused. You weren't. That one sentence, you weren't. It landed softer than I expected, but it shook something loose in me. I'd carried that guilt for years, like a stone in my pocket, always weighing me down. Guilt for not being kinder. For not letting things go. For speaking up when it was easier to smile and swallow it. My whole life Emily was the storm, and I was the one holding the umbrella, apologizing for the wind. Now Kelsey's voice echoed in my head as I lay awake in bed, watching shadows stretch across my ceiling like fingers I couldn't shake off. I thought about childhood birthday parties. Emily always stealing the spotlight, always needing the biggest slice of cake. And if I said anything, Mom would whisper, let her have this moment. She needs it more than you. That phrase had followed me into adulthood like a curse. She needs it more than you. I remembered crying once in high school after Emily mocked my speech at dinner. I'd worked for weeks on it for the statewide public speaking contest. She said it sounded like I was running for class president of a nursing home. Everyone laughed. Even Dad. I did too. And then locked myself in the bathroom until the water ran cold. Mom knocked on the door. You have to learn not to take things so personally. So I learned. I learned to bury the sting. To let her shine even if it meant I disappeared, but lately the sting didn't stay buried. It pulsed. Demanded attention. Especially when Mark thanked me for saving his life. That moment had cracked the narrative open. And I couldn't unsee it. I didn't want to. The next morning, I opened my laptop. Created a folder, named it Truth. Inside, I started collecting old emails, screenshots, messages from friends, photos, things I hadn't thought twice about before. Not to burn her down. Not yet. But to remind myself that what I'd lived was real. Gaslighting lives in gray areas. So I needed black and white. That folder Truth, it wasn't for revenge. It was for survival. Because the deeper I fell into the silence around me, the more I needed something solid to hold. Every time I opened it, I remembered that I wasn't crazy. That my memories weren't twisted. That the girl who laughed when I cried had become a woman who smiled while slipping pills. But knowing the truth, it didn't make the loneliness easier. A few days later, I drove to Tacoma. My parents' house still looked the same. White siding, faded shutters, the porch swing I painted in high school still creaked in the wind. Mom opened the door, surprised. But not warm. Like I'd interrupted something inconvenient. Laura. You should have called. I needed to see you. She stepped aside. I walked in. The smell of cinnamon and old furniture wrapped around me. Familiar. But not comforting. We sat at the kitchen table. The one with the scratch down the center from Emily's science fair project. She always blamed me for that too. I need to ask you something, I said quietly. Do you believe me? Mom didn't answer right away. She stirred her tea. Looked down. Then said, I believe you believe it. I stared at her. That sentence. It sounded supportive until you really heard it. It was a dismissal dressed in concern. And it broke something I didn't know was still whole. I stood up. I needed you to say yes. She looked up. Eyes full of unshed tears. I can't choose between my daughters. I nodded. Then you already have. I left without hugging her. Without saying goodbye, without turning back. In the car, I sat in silence. Rain dotted the windshield. And I realized I wasn't grieving Emily anymore. I was grieving the idea of family. Of being believed without proof. Of being protected, not tolerated. And I knew if healing was going to happen, it had to start without them. Healing doesn't always start with forgiveness. Sometimes it starts with paperwork. With silence. With one deep breath at your kitchen table while the rest of the world keeps moving. I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped expecting anyone to say, you were right. The truth was no one was coming to save me. And maybe that realization hurt most, but it also freed me. So I sat down, just me and a yellow legal pad, and made a list. At the top I wrote what's mine to protect. The first answers came easily. My business, my time, my health, my money. But then I kept going. My peace, my sense of reality, my memory. My ability to look in the mirror and not feel small. I underlined that last one. None of it said, Emily. None of it said, family. Not even Mark. That realization burned. Because for years I believed that keeping peace meant keeping everyone close, even the ones who chipped at me quietly. Especially them. I changed all my passwords. Bank, email, social media. Not because I thought Emily would break in. But because it felt like reclaiming a front door someone had once walked through without knocking. I checked my credit, froze a card, updated 2 security questions. I went through every account like I was moving out of a house where I'd once felt watched. And then I called an attorney. Not a corporate office. Not a man with marble floors and gold pens. Just a woman named Carla with a modest office above a used bookstore and kind, tired eyes. She let me talk. All of it. No interruptions. Just the occasional nod, the quiet click of her pen. When I was done, she said, "You're not imagining this. It has a name. Emotional abuse. Psychological coercion. It's more common than you think." I nodded slowly. Tears pricked but didn't fall. "I'm not looking for revenge," I said. "I'm looking for ground under my feet again." She smiled. "Then let's get you something solid." I walked out with a file folder and a plan. No fireworks, no courtroom drama, just steps. And this time I wasn't walking blind. The next morning, I made coffee and pulled my favorite mug from the cabinet. It read, "Protect your peace." Emily gave it to me last Christmas. Back then it felt sarcastic. Now it felt earned. That mug sat in my hand like armor. Warm, steady, and, strangely, defiant. I walked through the apartment slowly like I was seeing it for the first time. Every object became a question. Had I chosen this for me or to look presentable when Emily visited the throw pillows hers? The wine glasses, a gift from her wedding. The framed print in the hallway, she picked it out. How much of my life had been shaped by her presence even when she wasn't in the room? I pulled the print off the wall and placed it gently beside the recycling bin. I didn't break anything, didn't rage, didn't burn it all down. I just edited. One item at a time. That afternoon I bought a new candle. Not lavender, amber and oak. Earthy, grounded. Something that didn't remind me of her voice or her perfume. I took a long shower. Not because I was dirty, but because I felt like I had to wash her off me. The way she lingered in my self-talk. In the pause before I hit send on an email. In the way I checked my tone twice before speaking. This wasn't just about one party. It was about years of shrinking in small, polite ways. Years of second-guessing myself. Of walking into rooms already bracing for harm. That night I opened the folder Carla gave me. Read every line. It wasn't dramatic. But it was empowering. It was a roadmap. How to document harassment. How to protect assets. How to define boundaries legally. And most importantly, how to protect your narrative from being rewritten. Because that's what Emily had always done. Bent the truth, reshaped events, left me standing confused, holding a story no one else remembered the same way. Now I had paper, dates, receipts, screenshots. A journal. It didn't matter if anyone else read it. It existed. It was real. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't keeping my sanity a secret. The power wasn't in confrontation. It was in quiet preparation. In knowing that even if she never apologized, I'd never again be unarmed. Before bed, I moved the old Bennett sisters group chat archive to a private drive, not out of nostalgia, but as evidence. She might rewrite history, but I was writing everything down. The hardest part wasn't collecting evidence, it was unlearning the silence. Every time I picked up a pen to write down something Emily had done, a lie, a manipulation, a phrase she used to belittle me, I hesitated. Somewhere inside a voice whispered, "Don't be petty, don't be dramatic, don't cause trouble." But that voice wasn't mine. It was hers. It was my mother's. It was the voice of every woman taught to smooth the surface while she bled underneath. I wrote anyway, page after page. Sometimes shaking, sometimes crying, sometimes just numb. And when I finished each entry, I didn't feel lighter. But I felt stronger. Like I was finally standing on a floor that didn't tilt every time someone else entered the room. I started walking every morning. No music. No podcasts. Just my breath and my thoughts and the gravel beneath my sneakers. The trees didn't care what Emily said. The wind didn't gaslight me. Nature gave me something my family never had: neutrality. After each walk, I'd sit on the back porch with a notebook. Not to plan. Not to scheme, just to observe. To feel how my body responded to stillness when it wasn't wrapped in guilt. I noticed things I hadn't before, like how often my shoulders curled inward. How I apologized for things no one noticed. How I flinched at sudden laughter. I didn't need Emily to hurt me anymore. I had internalized the pattern. But now I was unlearning. One quiet act at a time. I called Kelsey again. Told her everything I was doing. The walks. The lawyer. The folder. She didn't say, wow. She didn't say, you're brave. She said, that sounds steady. And I smiled. Because I'd never wanted to be brave. I just wanted to stop flinching. That night I lit the amber candle. Saturday on the floor. And whispered to no one in particular. She doesn't get to define me anymore. The next step would be hard. The next step might be public. But I wasn't afraid of the noise anymore. Because I had lived through the silence. And I had come out the other side. If someone manipulated you for years, but no one believed would you go public or stay silent? It didn't happen with a bang. There was no dramatic slam of a door. No climactic shouting match. It began with a choice. A very quiet one. I stopped asking, why did she do it? And started asking, what will I do now? The answer wasn't easy, but it was mine. I wrote it down in my journal that morning. I will no longer orbit her story. Because for too long I had. Every choice, what to wear to dinner, how much to share on social media, when to speak up, it all revolved around Emily. Would she criticize? Would she twist my words? Would she find a way to take my light and call it hers? No more. The next step was practical, not emotional. I sat at my laptop and crafted a message. Simple, clear, not cruel. I sent it to Mark. I need to talk. Just the two of us. No drama. No yelling. Just truth. He replied within the hour. Yes. I've been waiting for this. We met at the public library. Neutral ground. Fluorescent lights. No candles, no wine glasses, no history thick in the air. He looked tired, but lighter. Like someone who'd been holding a backpack full of bricks and had finally set it down. I brought the folder. Not to wave around, not to threaten. Just to place on the table between us, like a reminder that I wasn't alone in my story anymore. We didn't speak for the first minute. We just looked at each other. And for once we weren't connected through Emily. We were just two people who had survived something subtle but violent. I'm not here to make you choose sides, I said softly. I'm here because I'm reclaiming mine. Mark nodded. He didn't ask for details. He didn't flinch. I'm sorry, he said, for not seeing it. For not stepping in sooner. I shook my head. No more sorries. We're both done apologizing for her. He reached across the table, not to hold my hand, but to tap the folder. Do you know what you're going to do with all of this? I looked him in the eye. Yes. And I'm going to do it quietly. We stayed at that library table for nearly an hour. No shouting, no blaming. Just two people untangling a web they hadn't even realized they were caught in. Mark shared things I never knew. How Emily isolated him from his sister. How she accidentally deleted voicemails from his boss. How she convinced him over and over that his forgetfulness wasn't normal until he began to doubt his own memory. Sometimes, he said quietly, she'd tell me I'd said things I never said. And I'd believe her. I nodded. I know that feeling. We weren't swapping war stories. We were building a timeline. For him. For me. For clarity. Then I took a breath and slid the folder toward him. I'm not here to take her down. I'm not going to post anything online. I don't want her ruined. But I do want a record. Because she always rewrites everything. Mark opened the folder. Slowly. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, summaries, nothing vicious. Just facts. His hands didn't shake, but his breath caught, and that told me everything. She always made herself the center, he said after a long pause. No matter who was hurting, I nodded. But now she doesn't get to be the center of mine. We talked logistics next. He wasn't ready to leave her, not yet. But he was ready to stop lying for her. "I'll tell your parents what I saw," he said. "I'll tell them the truth." That hit me harder than I expected. Not because I thought they'd suddenly change, but because it wouldn't be just my voice anymore. I didn't cry. Not then. But I felt a crack, a good one. Like the opening of a window in a stuffy room. As we left, I turned to him. "One more thing." He waited. "When I do move forward with this, I don't want it to be loud. I want it to be clear, measured, unshakable. So that even if she spins her version, mine will already be standing." He nodded. That's the kind of truth people can't ignore. And that was the moment I knew I didn't need revenge. I needed records, I needed rhythm, and I had both. 2 days later, I met with Carla again. Same bookstore office. Same calm blue walls. But I wasn't trembling this time. I sat straighter. My voice didn't waver. I handed her the updated folder. And for the first time, I felt like the story was mine, not something I had to defend. Carla flipped through the pages, nodding slowly, then she looked up. "You're not here for action. You're here for clarity." I nodded. "I want to file a statement. Not to press charges. Not yet. But if anything escalates again, I want a documented pattern. Not just my word." She smiled gently. "That's a wise move." I left her office and walked straight to a print shop down the street. Ordered 5 copies of the file. Labeled them. Placed them in envelopes. Sent one to myself. One to Mark. One to a locked cabinet at my office. The others stayed with Carla. It wasn't for drama. It was insurance. It was history untouchable. Back at home, I changed my voicemail. New tone, professional. Clear. I archived every old voicemail from my mother. Not deleted, archived. Because even guilt leaves fingerprints. That night, I reorganized my apartment. I moved the furniture. Hung up new art. Threw out every object that made me feel like I had to perform for someone else's comfort. I made a space for who I was becoming. Not who I had to be around her. Emily hadn't reached out since our last conversation. No apology, no fake text. Just silence. And for the first time, I didn't panic when the phone stayed quiet. I welcomed it. I made tea. Turned off the lights. Watched the sky dim from soft amber to dark indigo. And I thought about all the times I kept peace by keeping quiet. All the times I bent just enough not to break. But now I wasn't bending. I was building. She wouldn't see it coming. Because it didn't look like revenge. It looked like stability. It looked like boundaries. It looked like a woman who no longer mistook silence for safety. It happened on a Sunday. Cloudy, uneventful. The kind of day you don't expect anything to break until it does. I wasn't planning anything. No reveal, no confrontation. Just brunch. Mark had invited our parents and a few extended family members to a casual meal at his place. He said it was time for everyone to see things clearly. I asked if he was sure. He said yes. I've lived in her world long enough. I didn't dress up, didn't wear armor, just jeans, a sweater, and the necklace Dad gave me when I turned 30. The one Emily said looked a bit mature on me. I wore it anyway. When I arrived, Mark opened the door with a nod. Calm. Resolute. The table was already set. Quiche, fruit, coffee. Nothing fancy. But everything intentional. Emily sat near the head of the table, her smile tight. Lipstick perfect. She looked surprised to see me. "You came," she said, like it was unexpected. Maybe she'd hoped I wouldn't. I nodded and took a seat at the far end. Far but not small. I didn't shrink. Not this time. Everyone made small talk. Dad commented on the weather. Mom complimented the quiche. Mark poured coffee like a host who had nothing to hide. Then, after the second round of mimosas, he stood. Tapped his glass. The room quieted. Emily looked up, smiling politely. She thought he was going to toast her again. Instead, he cleared his throat. "There's something I need to say," he began. No stuttering. No hesitation. Everyone turned. Forks paused midair. I want to thank someone at this table. Someone who acted quickly, and who saw what I refused to see for too long. I held my breath, not because I was afraid, but because I knew the earth was shifting. Laura saved my life. A silence dropped like glass, not broken, just sharp. Emily's smile faltered. She blinked, tensed. She saw something that night. And she made a choice that protected me. It forced me to look at patterns I'd ignored for years. He didn't name her, didn't accuse. But everyone heard what wasn't said. Emily's voice was the first to cut the silence. A thin, forced laugh. Mark, don't be ridiculous. You fainted. You were dehydrated. We talked about this. He turned to her slowly. I wasn't dehydrated. And you know that. The room froze. The way it does when someone says what no one's allowed to say. Emily's expression shifted just slightly. Not panic, not shame, just calculation. I'd seen it too many times to miss it. She tilted her head. Are you really going to embarrass me in front of my family? Mark didn't flinch. This isn't about embarrassment, this is about truth. Mom looked between them wide-eyed. Is someone going to explain what's going on? I didn't move. Didn't speak. It wasn't my moment. It was his. Mark reached into a manila folder on the sideboard. He pulled out 2 pages. Placed them on the table, side by side. One was a printed text thread between me and him. The other a record from the hospital. I'm not asking anyone to believe blindly. But this is what happened. Emily stood up slow and careful. She didn't touch the papers, didn't even glance at them. Instead, she looked straight at me. Her voice was sugar-laced. You've always hated me. And now you've poisoned him against me too. I didn't rise. Didn't blink. I didn't need to, I said quietly. You did that all on your own. Dad cleared his throat. A sound full of discomfort and something else, fear maybe. He looked lost. Like he wanted to dissolve into his coffee cup. Mom stood next. Emily, please. Just sit down. Let's not do this here. Emily's voice sharpened. No, let's absolutely do it here. You all want a villain. Fine. Maybe I am the villain. But at least I never abandoned this family like she did. Her finger pointed across the table. At me. The accusation in it decades old. I looked to Mom. Her eyes dropped. Her silence louder than anything. I didn't need them to defend me, not anymore. I came today, I said calmly, because Mark asked me to. I didn't come to expose anyone. But I also won't keep pretending. Emily's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought she might scream. Throw something, storm out, but instead she sat. Not in surrender, but in retreat. Like someone recalculating. The moment passed. But something had shifted permanently. No one touched the rest of their drinks. No one laughed again. The brunch continued technically, but the room had changed shape. And for once, I didn't feel like the unstable one. I felt rooted. Seen. Even if no one said it. After the last plate was cleared, no one asked to take a group photo. There were no toasts, no lingering hugs. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was clean. Like a slate being wiped down after decades of fingerprints. Emily didn't speak to me again that day. She avoided my eyes. Avoided Mark's too. She made small talk with an aunt about rosebushes. Pretended nothing had happened, but her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. She never could stay still when she didn't have control. I stayed seated. Watched the conversation like someone watching the tide go out. No drama, no storm, just slow, undeniable retreat. Mark helped clear the table. And as he passed behind my chair, he murmured, "Thank you for not taking the bait." I nodded. There was power in restraint. In not rising to her theater, in letting her fill the silence with her own unraveling. Outside, the sky was pale gray. Still, like the whole world had paused to exhale. Mom caught me at the door. She looked older than I remembered. Like the weight of pretending had finally started to wear her down. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. I looked at her not with anger but with the clarity of someone who had finally stopped begging. You don't have to say anything, I said. But you do have to stop protecting what's hurting people. She didn't argue, didn't defend. She just stood there, lips pressed into a thin line, and let me walk past her. Outside, the air felt sharp and new. I took a deep breath. The kind that fills your lungs with something that isn't fear. At home, I lit the amber candle. Not for comfort, but to mark the close of something. The end of the quiet war. Not everyone saw what Emily had done. Not everyone believed it. But the ones who needed to, they saw enough, and that was all I ever needed. I didn't win. There was no trophy, no applause. But I had something else. I had my voice. I had my name. And I had a space inside me that no longer whispered, "Maybe it was your fault." Because it wasn't. And I didn't have to prove that to anyone else ever again. 3 months passed. Not much changed on the outside. Emily was still married to Mark. My parents still lived in Tacoma. No grand announcements, no dramatic exits. But inside my world, everything had shifted. Emily and I hadn't spoken since that brunch. No birthday text. No sudden drop-by. Not even the annual holiday card with a forced family photo. She disappeared. Not out of punishment. But because her games no longer worked, there was no stage left. No audience still applauding. So she stepped away quietly. And I didn't chase her, not once. Some mornings I'd wake up with a dull ache, a muscle memory of guilt. I'd hear my mother's voice in my head. Try to be the bigger person. But I'd learn something. Being the bigger person isn't about staying silent. It's about choosing peace over performance. Truth over tradition. Your own voice over someone else's comfort. I still lit the amber candle in the evenings. Not for ritual. Just because I liked the scent. It didn't smell like her anymore. It smelled like my space. The apartment had changed too. New curtains, a different table. The old couch, the one Emily once picked out, was gone. Donated. Replaced with something soft, warm, and wholly mine. I'd stopped drinking wine the way I used to. No more performative pours when guests arrived. No more second-guessing whether my laughter was too loud for someone else's taste. I drank tea. Strong, simple peppermint. The kind that wakes you up without pretending to be elegant. Work felt different. I said no more often. Not harshly, just clearly. I was no longer afraid of being seen as too direct. Too sharp, too much. And in that clarity, I started mentoring younger women in my field. Not formally, but intentionally. One lunch here. One late-night email reply there. I didn't give them business strategies. I gave them language. The kind of words I wished someone had handed me years ago. Like, you're allowed to walk away without explaining. You're not difficult. You're discerning. And quiet doesn't mean small. One evening, I opened my old messages. Scrolled through years of exchanges. Family group chats. Photos. Voice notes. The ones where Emily made herself the star. Where I was always slightly out of frame. I hovered over the group labeled Bennett Sisters. Paused. Then renamed it Laura's Line. No drama, no deletion. Just reclamation. Dad called me a few weeks later. We didn't talk about Emily. But he asked how I was sleeping. That was new. Mom sent a card for my birthday. No long message. Just a sentence, "I'm learning." And that was enough. For now. Because this wasn't about who apologized first. It was about who finally stopped apologizing for breathing. I never imagined that silence could feel warm. But in the months after the brunch, it wrapped around me like a soft coat. Not the silence of fear. Not the kind you sit inside wondering if you're wrong. But the kind you build slowly, deliberately, to protect peace. Emily stayed silent too. No messages. No calls. No sudden gestures of reconciliation wrapped in sarcasm. She simply faded. And I didn't miss her. Not in the way people expect. Not even in the way I once feared I would. I missed the fantasy of us. The imaginary sisterhood I clung to for decades. The idea that if I just tried harder, bent more, kept showing up, she would meet me halfway. But she never did. And now I had stopped walking toward her. I was walking toward myself. The change was quiet but constant. I woke up earlier, not to prove anything, just to enjoy the light. I started journaling again. Not to vent, not to track pain, but to witness myself in full without needing validation. I bought a new dining table. Not expensive, just wide enough to hold the people who mattered, the ones who made room for truth. Mark called me once months later. We didn't talk about Emily, but we talked about clarity, about how strange it feels to breathe fully after years of holding your breath for someone else's mood. I'm learning, he said quietly. I'm learning how not to flinch at softness. I understood that more than he knew. Some days I still felt the old echoes. The guilt, the what-ifs, the doubt. But they didn't command me anymore. They were whispers I could acknowledge, then let go. I didn't need to rewrite history. I just needed to stop letting her version be the only one that survived. And in that quiet I found something unexpected, a desire to speak. Not about her. Not to destroy, but to tell the truth mine. Not in a scream. Not in shame. But in stillness. Like someone who had walked through fire and realized her voice was the thing that couldn't be burned. It started with a microphone. Borrowed, dusty, handed to me by a friend who said, "You always tell your story like it matters." Maybe it's time other people hear it too. I didn't intend to launch anything. There was no brand, no intro music. Just me sitting on my bedroom floor with tea cooling beside me, speaking into the quiet. I named the first episode "When They Don't Believe You But You Know." I spoke slowly, carefully. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally respected my own voice enough to give it space. I didn't mention Emily by name. I didn't need to, the details weren't the point. The shape of the pain was. The way it molds you when you're constantly shrinking to make others comfortable. The way you learn to doubt your own memory. Your instincts. Even your kindness. I uploaded it without fanfare. No announcement. No hashtags. And yet 2 days later an email arrived. It was from a woman in Michigan. Older than me, she wrote, "Your words cracked something open." I didn't even know I'd buried that deep. Then came another, and another, some short. Some gutting. They all carried the same theme. Me too. But I've never said it. I kept recording. Not on a schedule, not for downloads, but for connection. One night I got a message from a therapist in North Carolina. She said she now recommended the podcast to clients who struggled with gaslighting in their families. Because it's not about blame, she said. It's about reclaiming. I sat with that word for a long time. Reclaiming. It felt right. I wasn't trying to be right anymore. I was trying to be whole. And sometimes being whole means telling your story without apology, even if your voice shakes, even if no one claps, even if the person who hurt you never listens, especially then. The mic became my mirror. And through it, I started seeing myself more clearly. Not just as the woman who survived Emily, but as the woman who stepped out from behind her. One Saturday morning, I walked to the farmer's market near my apartment. The sky was crisp. The kind that makes everything feel new, even your own breath. I passed a booth selling handmade journals. One caught my eye, dark green leather, simple, with the words, in her own words, embossed in gold. I bought it without hesitation. Not to document pain, but to collect strength, moments of clarity. Small victories. New boundaries. Old beliefs I'd finally laid to rest. That night I sat by the window and wrote on the first page, "I wasn't too much." They were too committed to smallness. I lit the last amber candle in the box. The one I'd been saving. The scent drifted into the room, oak, firewood, something grounded. I didn't cry, I didn't ache. I just exhaled. My mother called 2 days later. She didn't ask about Emily. She didn't avoid her either. She said simply, "I'm starting to understand what I didn't see. I hope that matters." And for the first time it did. Not because it changed the past, but because she said it without defense. Without asking me to shrink to make her more comfortable. A few months later, I got invited to speak on a podcast, not mine. A larger one. Audience in the thousands. I almost said no. But then I remembered what it felt like to hear someone else tell the truth first. How much that opened in me. So I said yes. And when they asked how it felt to finally be vindicated, I said, it's not about winning, it's about no longer living in someone else's shadow. They asked what I would tell the old version of me, the one who drank the tea, swallowed the guilt, and stayed small. I smiled and said, she was never small. She just didn't know her size was allowed. Legacy isn't what we leave behind, it's what we break free from. It's the permission we give others to stop apologizing for surviving. And that's the only legacy I ever wanted. Not applause. Not a clean ending. Just room to breathe. Have you ever stepped out from someone's shadow and found your voice? Tell your story below. You never know who needs to hear it. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more quiet legacies, healing truths, and second chances that begin in silence.